Coucou guys, welcome to Not So French podcast, a podcast about living in Paris, feeling foreign, and finding your place in between. My name is Fariza.
I'm Mouna.
And today we will have really creative fashion episodes because we have a guest. Aleksandra, please introduce yourself. She's actually our professor at our school.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you. Hello, girls. Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
What would you like to know?
Tell shortly about yourself, maybe what you're doing, because I know that your professional path is so interesting.
Oh, thank you. I've worked for a long time. I've worked in fashion since 1996. I started off, I didn't study fashion. I read literature at university because my parents wanted me to do a proper degree, as they called it. And I went all throughout my literature degree. I worked for different newspapers and magazines because I understood the importance of getting experience in the field. So I think that's still just as relevant today as it was a while back. And then I went to learn about styling. I worked at Dazed and Confused magazine. And then my career evolved. I did go back to study a few years. I worked for some while, and then I went and did the Masters in Fashion Design at Central St Martin's, which was amazing, under the fabulous teacher Louise Wilson. And I've been working as a stylist and a creative director ever since.
Oh, that's amazing. My career is kind of the opposite. So hearing this makes me feel really good, actually, because I go to the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York.
Oh, amazing.
So I started my career in fashion, but then found a passion in literature. So after I finish my bachelor's, I actually plan on doing my master's in creative writing or English or anything like that.
Oh, fantastic.
But I really admire the fact that you were able to put all your different skills together and create a career that sounds so cohesive and makes perfect sense. But I'm sure at the time you were just figuring it out, and I just think it's beautiful how it all came together and that you were able to accomplish so much and put literature and fashion together.
Yeah, I mean, I think, my teacher on my master's was extremely influential to me. Louise, she had a bit of a reputation in the industry for being quite harsh, but I always really appreciated her and was blessed to call her a good friend after the masters. But she was a wonderful teacher, and she said that I take you onto the masters because you're interesting, and the best people in the industry, she said, bring something from the outside. Because if fashion just talks about fashion all the time, gosh, isn't that a boring place? And I sort of really go by that. I think fashion is a cultural reflection. And so I love it that it's this melting pot of all these different ideas, cultures, concepts from all over the world that all come together. And it's showing a mirror up to society. And therefore it can show the superficiality of society, but it can also talk about quite profound issues. At the moment, fashion, although it does use some political issues for marketing purposes, including feminism, I do think that it still can make people think and cast a light onto different subjects that maybe we don't like to talk about as a society.
Yeah, that's really true.
I think the field of fashion is so interesting field. It's huge one.
Huge, yeah.
You can find your place, because for even now I'm studying fashion, but I don't know which specific field into fashion I want to go, because I like doing events, I like creative direction, I like styling, and I don't know where exactly to go. Yeah. And yes, you have also different experiences. I think you had experience in styling, creative direction. Yeah. Which one you would prefer?
For me, it's sort of one thing, because actually, so I started off many, many years ago, many moons ago, when I was still studying my bachelor's degree. So that was a long time ago now. I started with fashion journalism just because I was from a literature background. It seemed like the logical thing to do. But then, so I wrote for The Guardian and different newspapers and magazines. But then I learned about styling through doing an internship. I didn't know this existed before. I was from quite a traditional Polish, Eastern European background. And, you know, I love my community, but there wasn't really scope for creative fields. You know, art wasn't an option, or fashion or things like this. So I didn't, and also styling, I think, was quite a new profession at that time. So I learned about this through doing work experience. And I think that's why it's great to do internships, even if they're not paid, because it does give you a great insight into what different jobs are, because you can learn all the theory in the world at university, but it's very different when you go into the workplace and you're dealing with politics and, you know, all of these other factors come into play. So I learned about styling. I was blessed enough to assist amazing people like Katie Grand and Camille Bido-Waddington, and just incredible stylists that taught me a lot, not just about what styling is, but also about the fashion industry itself, you know. And then what happened was, when I was working with a few of these amazing stylists, some of them started to realize that I loved research. And I think that's something I still have today. You know, I think research for me is the foundation of any sort of creative practice. And by research, I don't just mean going on Google, which sadly is what a lot of researchers come to today. But, you know, I love nothing more than, you know, digging around vintage shops and museums and galleries and libraries. Gosh, there's nothing like, you know, just going into a library and starting at one end of the art section or the architecture section or whatever it might be, and just taking every book off the shelf and looking through it, because you never know what you might find. Whereas, you know, Google is, you know, it's all governed by algorithms, and that's why a lot of research today looks the same. So, so a few of these ladies started to see that I was good at research. I had an eye for finding things, and so they started to send me to vintage stores and, you know, to find things to inspire designers. And you know, I didn't know that was a thing at that time. And so then I was suddenly, you know, doing research for Tom Ford and bringing vintage garments to these designers, that then, you know, inspired them for their designs. So then that helped me to sort of learn about creative direction. So for me, you know, it wasn't such a big leap. And then when I went and did my master's at St Martin's, which was in fashion design, it was a very creative direction or styling led approach to design, meaning it was about getting vintage things and chopping them up and playing with them. And that's something that I carried throughout my career, is that idea of mixing and matching things together to create looks that can then be developed by design teams.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
It was really fun. I loved it.
I mean, like, I will take in my mind, because like I'm doing research for my thesis. I'm graduating my master's, and I'm writing about fashion in Uzbekistan, Central Asia.
Great.
So for me, yes, I'm here, I'm far from my country, so all my research is through the internet. But like the things that you told, like going somewhere, like learning, like physically, I think it's give total different perspective. And like,
I mean, I'm surprised that you say this, because yes, you're not in Uzbekistan, you're in Paris, and you've got the Not So French podcast. So how great that, you know, that you can come here to Paris, where there is such an incredible wealth of culture, and especially as students, you know, you get in for free to the museums and galleries. So it's a great place to do research, you know, and also, you know, you can make requests to archives and things. You know, I think you could go to a different museum or gallery or exhibition here every day and feel wonderfully inspired. So I suggest you get off your laptop and get into, you know, the things there are to see. You know, I feel like I have a list that I just never get around to seeing everything, because there's so much on here, and the thing is that you never know what's going to spark that you know, often it's not the things, and that's the problem I have with Google, even though I love, you know, the internet, it's a great tool, but Google kind of works on you feeding in information, or ChatGPT, and you're asking it something, you know. Whereas when you go to an exhibition, it could be the smallest thing that sparks a complete new way of thinking or a new idea, in a much more intuitive way than going on the internet. And also, for me, the internet flattens out all the images, all of the pictures. You know, there are certain things that look good on the internet, but when you see them in reality, they don't look good, and vice versa. So get out there.
I definitely love that. So I'm an older student, because I started FIT back in 2015, and I started working in fashion and casting and production.
Amazing.
I really loved it. But it just didn't feel entirely right, you know? And I had always been a writer, but similar to you, my parents saw a business degree and as more practical than creative writing. However, in between, like in my mid-20s, when I was looking for myself in New York City, I started copywriting.
Right.
So one of my goals is actually to become a creative director, but from the point of writing, like copywriting and finding out how to do bring projects to life, but through words, right? Like you always have the art director and the creative director. And one thing that I appreciate about my home university is that they do encourage you to do actual research. And I also am grateful that I'm a bit older, because when I was younger, we weren't allowed to use Google because Google and Wikipedia was still pretty new. So we would have teachers say, no Google, no Wikipedia.
Gosh, that's a bit harsh.
Yes, but I appreciate it now because I feel like no one uses encyclopedias anymore. And I remember we had to at least have one citation that was used with an encyclopedia. And I agree. I think that like generative AI, right? But we also have generative minds as well. And so I just agree with everything that you said. And in my current program, it also has really pushed me to become a member of different libraries. Like, for example, at the Met Museum, they have a research library in there.
Amazing.
And it's truly one of the most amazing things. And I think a lot of people also don't realize how accessible it is.
Absolutely.
Because with that library membership, it's free. And I remember I only went because in class they made us go. And, you know, our professor told us, he was like, take advantage of this. You know, it's so many resources are there for you and it's free, but I guess, I don't know, you just don't really hear about that online so much. But I mean,
that's something I really appreciate, excuse me. That's something I really appreciate about London as well, and England in general, is, you know, that the museums and galleries are free apart from for the big paid exhibitions that, you know, tour and, you know, have cost a lot of money. But the permanent exhibitions that are owned by the state are accessible to everybody. And I hope that that continues in the UK, because it's wonderful, because it means that the creative fields are available to a much broader diversity of people, and it becomes less elitist, and I think that's only a good thing, really.
That's so true.
And like you say, I would love it if more people took advantage of that throughout the world and wherever we can.
It is so accessible here in Paris. I mean, like in France in general.
For students,
Yes,
I think because otherwise it can get expensive.
But I mean, like in Italy, it's not like that. We have discounts, student, but it's not free. So that's why I'm enjoying like being here to go in different exhibitions. And actually, we had like an episode about place you can go in Paris, like exhibitions, museums, and it is like, it's cool.
Yeah, and I've aged out of the most of the free programs, and it made me appreciate New York more, because they have student discounts. It isn't usually based on age, but if you are a New York City resident or a tri-state resident, most things are free.
Great.
And being in Paris and seeing how expensive things can get made me much more appreciative of all of these opportunities to learn and study. And even if I also think when it comes to art, you don't necessarily have to work in it to engage with it.
Absolutely,
I think that with art and all liberal arts is very philosophical. And I feel like it can really help broaden the mind of each person and each individual. So I'm always a supporter of that. And I think even when, you know, if you live in a country or city that doesn't have access to these things, I also think, again, there's so many programs that you can sign up for or, you know, just discover and study abroad, you know? Like,
I think also, you know, a lot of you are from different places. It's a wonderfully multicultural environment here in Paris within the school environment. And you know, I've been doing this creative direction class where we make a magazine, and it's super fun because, you know, we have students from all over the world, and I don't do a great deal of teaching because I don't have time, but I do enjoy this class very much because you get to hear the perspectives of people from all over the world and their view on Paris. And I think that's one of the great things about coming to study abroad or traveling anywhere in general, is that, for example, I lived in London for many, many years, and still go to and fro. But I have a much greater appreciation of British style now that I'm not full-time in London, whereas I just took it for granted, the liberty and the eccentricity of British style while I was there. Whereas then I came to Paris and I was like, everybody was so looked in a very certain way.
Yeah.
I think things have changed in Paris. It's become a lot cooler, and there's a new generation of designers that are quite exciting, like Marine Serre, and I love Charlotte Chesnay, the jewellery designer, and there's so many interesting things going on at the moment, fashion-wise. Not necessarily, with the big brands, but with more independent designers. There's a scene now, and even with restaurants and the younger chefs of the Michelin restaurants and things coming through in Belleville or the 19e or the 20e, there's things going on that feel a bit more energetic in a way that there wasn't when I first started coming here.
Yeah.
How was the fashion, like the field, when you just started your path, and how it's now? Do you feel the big differences?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things about a fashion career is you have to evolve with the times. Fashion is a really exciting industry because it's ever changing. So if you're somebody that is curious and fascinated by the world, it keeps you on your toes. But on the other hand, if you're somebody that just wants something very stable and steady, it's not like that. So you have to be very versatile and flexible and be able to change. So, obviously when I started, it was all about print media was the big thing, and digital, I remember we didn't even have a computer in the office, or we had to fax all of our requests for interviews or for Fashion Week. Actually, I love a fax machine. I do miss them because you could kind of draw and you got a bit of character through. I guess in the way that we send each other pictures today on WhatsApp or something like that. Magazines were the kings and queens in a way, and now it's all about digital. And also I think now there's many more people working in fashion. It's become much more of an industry. I think when I started it was more creative. Certainly in London it was very creative and everything was quite new. It wasn't so much of a business, whereas now it is the business of fashion and it is a proper industry. But it's still an exciting and fluid and evolving industry. But nevertheless, it's all become a lot more regimented, I suppose. For example, a catwalk show has a specific format now, whereas before it was a lot more experimental in terms of the tempo of the models down the catwalk, or even where the venue would be, or things were a lot more experimental. And it was much more sort of hands-on when I started. Although I guess I was working for a lot of style magazines too, so that was a lot more, by the nature of those magazines, it's going to be a lot more hands-on. You didn't have to use just the advertisers, for example, when you styled fashion shoots in magazines. It was. I felt it was maybe perhaps more creative, or perhaps creative in different ways, we could say. But I think that on the other hand, now there's so much more capacity. You can do a podcast from school. Isn't that amazing? We can do it. We can make a magazine from the classroom, and that's incredible. People can start their careers on Instagram or TikTok or different platforms. So I think there's many more routes into fashion and the creative fields today than there were before. There are still elitist aspects, but I always think if I can do it, then you can do it too. Whatever background you're from, I think there is a way in if you really want it.
That's true.
I have a question. I mean, everyone scares me that the fashion field, it is something like you have to have connection, otherwise you will never get in.
It's true.
And I'm like, okay, what if I don't have connection?
Well, you've got to make. Then that's your first mission, right? That's great that you're aware of that. So your first mission is to make connections.
But how? How to start it? I mean, internship, yes, definitely. Because we talked about last episode too, how it's important and how it's difficult to make it here. But
so what I would suggest you do is, I always say to my students in class that it's really important to know yourself. And I know that some of you are, and some of the listeners too, will be of an age where you're sort of discovering yourselves a bit, although that sounds a little bit cheesy, the voyage of self-discovery. Life is a voyage of self-discovery, but I'm sure you know what I'm trying to say. So you need to sort of think about what's important to you at this moment in life, whether you're an older student or not a student, a younger student. What's important to you right now? So for some people, it might be that they know that they want to have a family. you know, someone that's always wanted to have children and a family. Or maybe somebody knows that they want to, you know, live near their parents or go back to where they come from. And anything is valid. That's the thing. You just have to be really true to yourself at this moment in your life, because it will change, you know. Our desires and things change, but our values, they sort of, maybe they adapt, but, you know, that's what's really important to think. What's really important to me? And then as that starting point, you know, write it down and have that as your starting point. Okay, what, if that's important to me, you know, how important is that to me? Is it the most important thing? Or is it something that for a few years I can leave? You know, where am I at? And also, by that I mean, you'll meet some people that it's like the career is the most important thing to them, you know, and they want to work for certain brands, and they're just like that, you know, that's what they want. They want to be a career. I'm not going to say a career bitch, because not all people that have careers are bitches, right? You know, we don't all need to be Miranda Priestley, although I think she's very misunderstood, Miranda Priestley.
I agree.
I actually think she's not, you know, she's just a bubusinesswoman, and we're not used to seeing, you know, strong representations of women on screen or in literature. So I don't think she's, you know, if it was a man like that, I'm not sure that we would really bat an eyelid. So anyway, so I would say, first of all, have a sense of your values and what's important to you at this point in your life, and then go from there. So maybe there's a company that you want to work for. So first you need to research, does that company work with my values, or am I willing to accommodate it? So ask around, especially if you're at fashion school, you know, because you start to hear, you know, in Paris, for example, you hear, oh, that studio, for example, or that company, oh, they're really into clubbing and going out, right? And they're really into like, I don't know, edgy things. Okay, great, but that's not me, you know. So it's oh,
It's okay.
Ooh. Sorry, I just knocked the mic there. It's like a little caterpillar. So you have to be true to yourself, you know, and so for me, you know, I've always, on an aesthetic level, I've always liked things that are, I'm from an Eastern European background, so we have this notion of, you know, of elegance, and, you know, I always saw my mum in a skirt or a dress, and I love that. So, and you have to just accept that that's you, right? I love elegant style. I like things that are quite feminine, you know, that's not necessarily going to be the most cool and edgy thing in the world, you know, and that's fine. But then I'm not going to go and work for that brand where people are out clubbing and, you know, doing more edgy fashion, you know, because it's just not my thing. So you have to be sort of true to yourself, your style, your values. And maybe you hear rumours like, oh, at that studio, they work till 2:00 in the morning, right? Okay, so if you want to have a family and kids, maybe that's not going to be the right company for you. And so there's, you know, there's got to be some give and take, because maybe that's your dream company, but actually it doesn't correspond with your values. Once you've sort of worked out what's important to you at this point, then you go and engage in research, right? And this is where I think the internet is amazing these days, because you can use LinkedIn, although I don't love LinkedIn, but you can use LinkedIn, and loads of fashion people, you know, we don't really use it. But it's a really great tool for like looking up people in companies, right? So, because it tells you who works where, and then you can find them, then you've got the list of names, so then you can look on Instagram, right? Because as creatives, we're more visually driven. Right. And then you can look at their Instagram accounts, right? And then it starts, you know, an Instagram account, even though we know that it's only a version of reality, you know, it's not 100% everything. It's never going to be, you know, nor should it be. I mean, how awful if it was everything, you know. But that's another subject, surveillance culture. It terrifies me. So it gives you a little snapshot into different people's lives. So you can kind of see, are these people who work at these companies, are they like me? You know, do we hang out at the same places? Are they similar kinds of people? Would I fit into that work environment? Could I be, maybe not friends exactly with this person, but, you know, we spend so much time with our colleagues at work. So often people get hired, not just because they're skilled, because there are many skilled people in the world. There's many great fashion students, but also like by how you are as a person, right? I mean, gosh, doesn't everybody have a passion for fashion? You would hope, if they're going to work in the fashion industry. So what is it about you that's interesting? And what is it about you that reconciles with the people at that work, at that company, or that work culture? You know, so then you can start following some of those people that you'd like to work with. So you're sort of virtually already putting yourself into their universe, into that orbit, you know, and that's going to help you to get one step closer. I wouldn't exactly say I believe in manifestation, because, you know, it's a bit passive for me, but I do believe in, you know, visualizing your goals and then taking those next steps towards it, and they have to be tangible goals. So then once you've sort of planted yourself, you've discovered the sorts of places, the environments you might want to work, you can start reaching out to people, right? Liking their posts, don't be creepy, but, you know, liking their posts, so that, you know, eventually when you also write them emails with your CV. It doesn't always have to be through official channels like Fashion Jobs or whatever, you know. You can contact designers, smaller designers, bigger. If you've got no experience whatsoever, you know, maybe you're not going to get to Chanel first, but maybe you contact smaller designers that also fit with your vibe, you know. So again, it's about starting with research, and then that will give you something on your CV. And I would say also, to start with, if you've got no experience whatsoever, first of all, are you going on holiday, or are you trying to get work experience? Right? Because it's weird for me if somebody gets to the end of a bachelor's degree and has no experience. It's like, well, you've had time, you know. Students famously have more time as students than you will have in the rest of your life, probably, until you retire. So, you know, make the most of that. Go out and try things and grab opportunities and make opportunities. But if you don't have any fashion-related experience, if you're really at that starting point, then also make sure that you look at job descriptions for the kind of job you want, like a junior position that you would ultimately one day like to get, and look at the keywords. What sort of skills are they asking for? So is it that they're looking for somebody really organised? Is it they're looking for somebody really efficient? So I'll give you an example from my experience. When I used to work as a fashion director for a magazine in London that was like an art and fashion magazine at that time called Exit, you know, I got loads and loads of emails and letters of people wanting to assist me and get internships and so forth. Many of them were just general. They go straight in the bin. Dear sir, madam, no interest. You know, it's not interesting to me. What I want to know is, why does somebody want to work with me and the magazine in particular? And what skills do they have to bring? Now, if I'm writing a job description, which I have done sometimes, what I don't want is somebody that comes to me and says, "Oh, I've got a styling portfolio. I'm a really good stylist." Okay, so why do you want to work with me? That's not what I can style. That's not the skill I need. What I need from an assistant is somebody that's really good on technology. I'm not so great on technology. You know, somebody that understands, is a people person, that can call the PRs, that knows all the PRs, that is organised and efficient, right? And that's way more important than being creative, or, you know, I've got those skills, you know, I don't need that. So think about what skills does the job actually need. And I say you can do that by looking at job descriptions, even if they're like a step up from what you're doing now, and then try and see what transferable skills you've got. So I remember looking at one CV that I'd received, and it was from a student. It was for an internship, and the student said that they'd worked at an old people's home. And I just thought, wow, you know, that really shows I couldn't do that. I would find that very, very challenging to work at an old people's home. You know, I loved my grandmother so much, but I saw her with dementia and getting older, and it was so difficult. And I'm just too emotional to do that kind of work. I don't think I could cope. So to me, somebody that could do that hard physical labour of working in a care home, that said a lot about the kind of person that was. It's somebody that's going to be hardworking, that's going to be dedicated, because you've got to show up to work, you know. And that's far more interesting to me, you know, than other skills. Do you see what I mean? So I think just make sure that you do stuff, that you're not just on the internet, that you're getting out there and experiencing life as well, you know.
You kind of answered a lifelong mystery that I've always had, right? So my first year at FIT, my first semester, like I think it was like the first month or two, first I was in love with Alexander Wang when I was 15. And that is purely why I went to fashion schools, because I was like, I am going to work for this man. I remember he had an event. It was free. I showed up.
Love that.
I literally showed up. 9 hours was not necessary, but it was a free event. So I thought the line would be crazy. But I waited 9 hours so I could be at the very front. I did get a free like sweatshirt signed by him because I was in front. But I remember I spoke to him and I was like, one day I'm going to work for you. And he was like, okay. He's like, what's your name? Gave him my name. And he's like, I'll remember that. I will never forget this. He was like, that's the name I'll remember, you know? Everything you're saying, though, turned out to be true. I realized that fashion wasn't necessarily right for me as a person, right? Like, I'm very creative, but I'm one of those creative people where I'm very, like, flowy. Like, I'm very...
little movement there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not there yet, but if I ever had an assistant, I would need somebody who's very, like, organized and like very, because I can be very, I'm inspired by this idea and I'm going to follow this a little bit, right? But I mention all that to say that when I was, during my first semester, after the Alexander Wang experience, I realized writing is what I love to do. I love to come up with ideas. I love to figure out how to make these ideas a reality. What is the game plan? The strategic, strategy is my thing, right? And I applied, I don't know what gave me the courage, but I applied for Simon & Schuster, the publishing company.
Amazing.
Yeah, they had an internship, but it was for business. It wasn't editorial because, I mean, I was doing a fashion program in business. And I remember just writing, this I think was my first cover letter ever. And basically, it was like a miniature essay of why this company meant so much to me, why I wanted to go here. And with only high school experience, I ended up getting an interview. It was my first interview ever, so I did not do a good job. Like, I thought it was professional to keep your jacket on the whole time, but I didn't get the internship. But one thing that the woman who interviewed me told me is she was like, you know, usually we interview juniors and seniors, but your cover letter was just so passionate. It was so specific, you know? And I have been able to do that with different companies, but I've never truly felt that connection with other companies that I've applied to the way that I did there. But I never understood because, like I said, it was like a minute, you know, like it wasn't technically proper, you know. I remember I had a professor look over that cover letter and be like, this is too long, take this out, you
it
know?
sounds like, I might have said it was a bit long,
So, but I understand now, even though it may not have been technically correct.
Sure.
It was specific. You know?
Specific, and your truth came through. You know, it wasn't just bullshit, if I'm allowed to say that. You know, it came from the heart. You know, and I don't know if that's something that's important to me. I don't think it's important to everybody, but you know.
But people underestimate cover letters. I think people really don't care. Sometimes don't send even.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, you know, an element of seeing somebody's truth in whatever way that might be. You know, the word authenticity is so overused right now. But, you know, you've got to think that, you know, often we're faced with like 10 CVs that all look the same. So, you know, they've all used Canva, you know, it's all got the name on the top, the school, the education. It's like, oh, okay. So how can you give it a touch of yourself, either your CV or your cover letter? You're right. And that could be from the opening statement, for example. It could be through the way you word the cover letter.
So thank you for that. And I also wanted to comment on, I think fashion has changed significantly in the last 10 years. So I can't even imagine from the 90s because I remember when I started at FIT, that was when like streetwear became really, 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 really popular. You know, Yeezy had just came out and like Hood by Air and like, you know, and that's not what had attracted me to fashion. I like Yves Saint Laurent, like the most edgy for me was Alexander Wang, but it was truly more aesthetic.
I understand,
but Yves Saint Laurent was someone who inspired me a lot. And
when he died here, I was like, the whole of Paris was you know,
and even when they changed the name, that was my moment. But what I loved was what he did for fashion. You know, the way that he had made it so artistic and really it was an experience. And I felt by the time like 2015, 2016, 2017, it became so much more marketable. Became so much exactly. And I felt like that was lost, you know?
Yeah, I agree. It was for a while, but, you know, things come and go.
Yes. I like, even for example, the Louis Vuitton exhibition that they recently had or still have. I think that's a beautiful, like, example of how it is coming back, because a lot of people are appreciating over the years, over the centuries, like the art, I think people get really caught up in the extravagance, but I think people forget why it was even created in the first place, like why these pieces were created in the first place. Like earlier in the semester, I reference this often because I thought it was a great moment, but earlier in the semester we were out at like our friend's place, and one of her roommates, like, he was talking about how he doesn't see fashion as art, like it's not the same as a painting, and she did a beautiful job at explaining how that's just simply untrue, and talking about the history and the meaning and how it comes to be. And you may not engage with fashion in the way that you engage with paintings or any other studio art, even literature. However, there is value and historical context and growth that can come through engaging with it.
I think for me, fashion isn't necessarily art. But it's about the art of living and the art of savoir-faire. You know, there's the craft dimension, and I say it has a similarity to art in that it has the craft aspect, you know, the making something, and the cultural reflection aspect. But at the end of the day, it is a commercial enterprise as well, and that can make it even more interesting. You know, I don't think we always need, and definitely it has a strong relationship with art, especially right now, because fashion has become so product based. Brands are trying to find ways of elevating the product, and so they're putting it in an art context or collaborating with artists, or, you know, I find it quite interesting. Like you were saying, it all went a bit street, and then they needed to elevate it, so they started to have lots of fashion exhibitions, you know, to put it into a historical context and a cultural context. So I think it definitely has a close relationship to art, but I'm not sure if it's not the same as art for me.
But as creative director, how you like balance between it's commercial, but it's still like creative part.
I mean, I have to be honest with you, numbers are not my thing, but I do love seeing what's sold. I love it when, you know, you do your designs and you've worked with the team, and then you look every season, you know, or however many months, every month, and you see what's selling the most. And sometimes that's to do with the design being in tune with the zeitgeist. Sometimes it's just because something is trending that was random. And you really start to see, and, you know, I find that fascinating part of the process. And you've really got to understand who you're selling to. But then there also has to be this room for the new and the inspiring, and really about pulling away sometimes and saying, what do I feel is right for now, you know, beyond what has previously happened, you know? And that, I think for that aspect, you've really got to, again, it's about being very true to yourself and having time, which you don't always have in the industry, but it's about making that time for yourself to go inward and just feel, what do I feel is right for now? And then going into your research from there. As well as having that other aspect where you've analysed the sales figures, you've tweaked what's gone before. You know, you really do just have to do both. I don't think they don't necessarily need to be polar opposites.
True.
You know,
but
we can bring things in.
Did it influence on you, because like you moved different countries, and now you're in Paris? Like, why you're in Paris, and why you moved like from London? Because like for me it's like the both like big hubs of it, like hub of like creativity and fashion. But why Paris?
Because my style is more elegant, and I love the prettiness of Paris. You know, I'm from an Eastern European background, I might have mentioned, and, you know, a lot of Poland, although I've not lived in Poland, a lot of Poland got bombed during the war. And, you know, there's a new beauty to be found in that too, you know, through the brutalist architecture and the little the plants growing through and so forth. And I think Poland is amazing right now in terms of art. And, you know, sometimes it's great to look at these places that are not the fashion capitals. But for me personally, I was drawn to, I'd always come to Paris for fashion weeks and events and exhibitions, and so I'd always wanted to spend more time here because of the beauty, to be honest with you. And like you were saying earlier, you know, that's what's great here. Even if you even if you can't go to exhibitions for whatever reason, there's new ways of looking at it, you know, and just wandering around can be inspiring. Like recently, you know, I've just been going around some neighborhoods that I wouldn't necessarily go to, or that maybe I've poo-pooed in the past. And you suddenly just see something new. So sometimes it's about taking yourself out of your routine, you know, and forcing yourself to do that, you know. Like people say, oh, go walk a different way or whatever. But it's really true, because you don't know what you're going to see or discover or be inspired by. So you need to make those opportunities to have almost accidents, you know, accidental opportunities, we could call them.
I love that, because that's how I discovered copywriting. Because during my first 2 I like ended up in communications after, because I don't know, I was very bold when I was younger. I had another like Facebook message I had sent this person who went to my high school years prior, and I knew he was living in New York, so I had written him a long Facebook message about my plans for the future and if we could meet so I can ask him questions about life in New York. He didn't see it for 4 years. So it happened to, because that was when I was in high school planning college. So I was planning to go to New York. And then he responded during my second year at FIT. And he was like, oh my God, I am so sorry. I never saw this message. And we met, and I ended up getting my first paid internship ever, but it was actually at a financial firm in the communications department. And that was when I really understood just how big the world really was. Because prior to that, it's like, oh, I want to be a writer, but that's, you know, you know, it's like, it seems so unrealistic, seems so, you know, and I'm working in fashion, and I did enjoy the creative aspect of fashion. And I also do very much love the consumer science behind fashion, but I like it for multiple industries as well. But once I started working in communications, I realized, oh, wow, I can use my writing passion and my writing skills, but also combine it with my consumer behavior love. And, you know, and even though I have no passion for finance, I did enjoy that experience. And to this day, I'm very grateful for that experience. But definitely, though, I would say most of my 20s has been everything that you're saying, which is just doing different things. Like I'm sure if I had thought too deeply about it prior, it's like, oh, this is a financial firm. Like, you know, why would I want to do this? But it's like, you're 20, just try
and
it.
if you've got an opportunity, then that's great. And also, you know, sometimes we have these dream companies, for example, that we might want to work for. And sometimes the brand identity, the visual brand identity of a company, how we think it's going to be, is nothing like how it is in reality. You know, maybe you go and work for a company and then you absolutely hate it. You know, the work culture isn't how you expected, or your colleagues are not nice, or you're working for some toxic narcissist, or I don't know what it could be. And then, you know, so that's again why we have to be adaptable and also just accept. You know, I think there's a lot of fashion students out there, and students in general, and there's not so many companies. And, you know, we don't all need to go work at, you know, Dior. You might end up being true to yourself and realize that you're actually much happier working for a brand that nobody's ever heard of. And, you know, it might not have the immediate prestige of, oh, I've worked at Chanel, I've worked at blah, 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 but you might be a happier person. You might be better paid, you know. So again, that's why it's about sort of staying true to yourself. You know, is it that you really want those names on your CV? No, you know, that's great if you do, but it's not the be all and end all. And things change in our lives, don't they? You know, I'm at a stage now where I'm in a new phase of my life. I think the fashion industry is still amazing. It's changing a lot. There's new kinds of opportunities out there, especially in the fashion tech spectrum. But maybe for me, it's time to do something new as well. And, you know, I've been exploring new avenues within contemporary art, and, you know, maybe I'll be changing in the next few years too. And I think life is a beautiful evolution, isn't it, of creativity
so
and sort of self-discovery.
I actually wanted to ask, like, do you have any projects now? What are you doing now?
You know, I've always worked for other people. I mean, I've worked for myself. I'm self-employed, but, you know, I've given a lot of energy to different companies, and I love it. You know, I love working on visual branding and visual communication and, you know, creative direction. And I'm not giving that up immediately, but I just think there's something that I want to explore for myself, that's for me, that's not applying my skills for other companies, you know, but that's me. And also, my grandmother died, and, you know, she was very important to me because she raised me when my mum and dad were at work. Yeah. And I've recently also been applying for my Polish nationality, so I've really been sort of going back to my roots. Yeah. It's just a phase in my you know, life journey, and that's having sort of lived this fashion life for many years and loved it. And you know, I've met some amazing friends and colleagues in the industry and all the rest of it. But I find myself going back to my roots and saying, actually, you know, where did my grandmother come from? I knew so little about her, and actually you realise what a profound impact your child, you know, your childhood and your upbringing has on you. And so I'm just sort of going back to that, which I sort of put on hold for a long time because I was going into this different sort of creativity through fashion and styling, and, you know, I did my YouTube channel and all the rest of it, exploring different avenues. But yeah, I just want to do something that's for myself right now. I want to take this moment, maybe for the first time in my life, to be a bit selfish and say, you know, I want to explore my roots and my origins and why, and not just explore them for myself, but also to say, you know, what lessons did my grandmother have that, you know, I can share with the world. You know, maybe she didn't have that voice or that platform, and maybe I can have it in a different way. So I love that about life, that we're all constantly evolving.
I love that.
It sounds like an amazing stage in your life, something like big, new.
Yeah,
and like,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, but it's not like and it doesn't have to be about flip-flopping careers. It's just this idea of evolution, right? Yeah, it's never going to look good if you've, you know, had 6 months at different companies and you're just doing too many different things, you know, for 100 years. But you know, at the end of the day, hopefully we're going to live an old life, you know, to old age, and that just, I think for most people that is an evolutionary process, not a radical revolution. Although that might happen, who knows what's going on in the world.
No, that's very true. So I had actually dropped out of university after I became a copywriter, because before ChatGPT, it was much easier to just get jobs through
it has
my
definitely
portfolio.
changed. Yeah.
Yes. And so during the pandemic, and after ChatGPT came out around the same time, or exploded during that time, I was really forced to reevaluate my life and like think about where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And like you said, with values, like getting to the core of it. It's like, yes, you can look at the visuals and say, I like this, but why do I like this?
Exactly.
What inspires me? And I ended up going back to school, but I already got my business degree, but I didn't want to continue studying business necessarily. I felt like I had enough work experience to kind of be good with that. But I ended up going into art history, which is how I ended up here at this school. Right. Also realized I love it. Like, my dream is to have a collection. Like, I want to be an art collector. Like,
an art collector.
Yes. But in a more casual way, right? Like, I realize being here, not necessarily make my entire like career out of it, but it's a huge passion. I always love it. But this program unlocked something within me that I will forever be grateful for.
I love that.
Which is like my, I guess, dream company. It's not one company, but I found a few different companies like this. I want to do like legacy marketing. Like, I love using the word evolution. I love when you really study the history of whether it's a product, a company, a brand. And there are these very small, pretty much unknown to the general public marketing companies that are very, very good at legacy marketing. They're specialized in it. Their marketing is very outside the box. It's not necessarily, post an ad on social media, but I don't know, like, let's say you go to the Met Gala, you might see their marketing at the actual Met Gala as opposed to, you know, online. And I realized how much I love that, especially as a storyteller, as a person who loves to, like, I want to be a part of that. And it made me feel so grateful, because for a while there in my life, I was like, dude, like, where's all this going? Like, I have all these experiences and I can talk for hours about it, but where is this going? And
Yeah.
so I'm really happy that it made a full circle moment where it's like it all comes together there.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I feel like the evolution of life is truly I don't know. Best is subjective, but I think that it's one of the best things in life.
It's like our path in life. I mean, like,
Exactly.
it's so amazing. I mean, like, it was so inspiring. Heard your stories, and I mean, like, the whole episode was like inspiring for me because,
Thank you.
because like previous episode about internship was like useful. Like I could describe it useful, but this one was inspiring because like I learned so much, and actually, I really love your career path. I mean, like in the way how you developed and like what you're doing now. For me, it's kind of role model. That's the thing that I want in my life.
I've tried to stay true to myself and what I believe in and my own values. So I think that's great if you can do the same.
So it's amazing. I hope it was inspiring for you too. In this amazing ending, we want to finish our episodes. And like, first of all, I want to say thank you a lot.
Thank you for having me.
It was like our honor to have you here.
Yes, thank you.
So I hope you like our Slice of Paris. So stay bold.
Stay curious.
And stay inspiring.
Yeah.
Yay! Bisous, bisous. Bye.